Welcome everyone to our official launch of Helium 10's Learning from L's with Lem. Now the goal of this show is to share real stories about some common and not so common missteps that sellers have made on their Amazon journeys, and to ultimately learn from those whoops moments and to show those all to you. We're going to cover 2 to 3 stories and bring them back to life for you guys, because mistakes, they can be our best teachers, and they also make for some really great stories. So let's get started. Our first story of the week comes from a 6-figure seller based out of Atlanta, Georgia, who didn't realize that when a unit is refunded or returned, your Amazon FBA fees are not. Okay, let's rewind a little bit back here, because we want to put ourselves in the lens of a brand new seller, right? We're a brand new seller, we just launched on Amazon, we're getting sales, we're kicking butt, we're taking names, we're doing everything left and right that we should be doing, right? We're doing really well. But as always, and is a cost of doing business, we get our first refund or return. Gasp. Don't worry, honestly, isn't that big of a deal. Return rates and refund rates usually average around like 2 to 3% of your business, if that. So it honestly isn't that big of a cost when you look at the whole outlook of your business. So it's not something that's hugely something you need to be concerned about, but is definitely something that you should keep in mind when looking at your margins and trying to get like a full transparent view of your financial health of the business, which is something that this seller did not do. When a refund and a return occurs, Amazon does not refund the initial cost of the FBA fees. So instead, the entire value of the product is taken out of your seller funds. Now let's put it in the context of numbers. Let's say the seller is selling a product for $10. If this seller sells a product for $10, $5 goes to FBA fees, $5 goes back to the seller. In the case of a refund, and I'm selling it for $10, I have to give back the buyer's original $10. But in this case, Amazon doesn't return that original FBA fee. I know, they just keep it, right? So they keep the original $5 that they took out from that sale, and the $5 that you got in that revenue goes back to the buyers, along with an additional $5 from your seller funds to that buyer to make up for that $10. So you're essentially coming out negative in that scenario. Let's say that product gets returned back and then Amazon deems it as sellable inventory, which is best case scenario in that situation. Because now we can sell that product again. But don't go thinking that, hey, Amazon, we're all good, we're all squared away, we're all good, we don't need to pay FBA fees again. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I know, I'm sorry, not my fault. But that's just how it is on Amazon. That's not the case. What will happen in that scenario is, let's say you get a return product, it goes back into your inventory and it's sold again. Amazon will treat that as a new purchase, meaning that I'm selling it for $10, another $5 is going to go to Amazon FBA fees, and then $5 in that revenue goes back to me. So essentially, what does that mean for us? So when you have a scenario that happens to you like that, that means you're essentially paying for the cost of 2 sales, but with the profits of only 1 unit. And we didn't even discuss accounting for COGS, which is cost of goods sold, or PPC, which is pay per click or ads, or even any other marketing fees that can be associated with the cost of a purchase that can further impact the cost that a refund or return can have on your margin. And like I said at the very beginning of this, refund and return rates aren't honestly that high. They're usually around 2 to 3%, so they're nothing to be concerned about, but they can have a decent hit on your net margin if you don't calculate them right. So that's what this seller had to learn the hard way, is to account for refunds and returns and its impact on margin. So be sure to watch out for high rates of refunds or returns when an item gets returned, because Amazon doesn't refund the FBA fees. And when you resell that item, you have to pay Amazon FBA fees again. So you can help lessen your returns and refunds by utilizing Helium 10's pre-drafted refund and return templates, which is free. You know, your boy's got you, which is free, in follow-up to help mitigate those issues and to lessen those concerns for you. Our second story of the day comes to us from a 6-figure seller based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, aka me. Yes, I know, the show is all about making mistakes and showing how you can learn from them, and I'm willing to put one of mine out there for the people, for the audience. don't worry. It's not going to be a huge, massive mistake where I lost $1 million. It's nothing like that. But it is certainly something that caused me to have to learn a lesson the hard way, and I have to account for it when I was originally starting off on Amazon. So I do this sacrifice for you guys, so I hope you appreciate it. So let's get on with the story. When I was first doing arbitrage or wholesale, and I started that off when I was starting off to being an Amazon seller, I based my shipping costs off of having to send it to the fulfillment center or warehouse nearest me, which was like 15 miles away in Indiana, right? Because everyone has an Amazon warehouse nearest them, right? I think it's like the holy trinity of all like the commercially available spaces nearest you, right? It's McDonald's, Amazon fulfillment warehouse, and a random mattress store. That's just like the holy trinity. I don't know what to tell you. That's just what it is. That's just how the world works nowadays, I guess. But because of that, I always based my shipping costs or my expected shipping costs off of having to send it to that warehouse that was like 15 miles down the road. But out of nowhere, Amazon then told me that I had to actually send it to Texas one day, which was 1,200 miles. 1,200 minus 15 equals 1,185 additional miles that I had to pay for in shipping. That changed my cost from like $200 to $300 to like $1,500 to $1,750, which was kind of crazy. But that definitely was something that I had to learn the hard way, and my wallet took it even harder. So that was something that I had to account for and I didn't realize, is that actually how Amazon determines its FBA warehouse locations in terms of where you can send your product into is based on the geographical demand of your product and where the majority of your customers are located. And so usually it's pretty even split, so that like Amazon will default to sending your product to the closest warehouse to your location. But every once in a while, depending on the volume of your product, especially as you start scaling, getting larger and larger, Amazon's algorithm is going to realize that, hey, the majority of your customers are based out of Texas or based out of California or whatever it is, and then opt you into having to send it to a warehouse closest to them rather than somewhere that's closest to you out of convenience. And not only does higher shipping costs have to be something that you take into concern, but you also have to take into account longer receiving times, because warehouses that are closest to you, you can probably get your product received in only a matter of a few days after shipping. But because shipping times are so much longer, of like shipping it 15 miles down the road versus 1,200, your shipping times go from a couple of days to a couple weeks. So that's also something to keep in mind, is that when that does happen, the loss of opportunity of having to sell your product a lot more quicker, and in order to get that money back faster, you kind of lose out on that opportunity. So that's one of the big things that you got to be wary of, is the potential risk that Amazon will opt to send your product to a warehouse much farther than you expected. Usually it's sent to a warehouse nearest you, but sometimes they don't, and that's when it can impact your margin. So in that case, don't be like me and have a plan B to make up for your increased shipping costs and receiving times, and by increasing your price, running less ads, or whatever makes sense to you. Whatever it is, have a plan B in place, so that way you know when that does happen, if that does happen, you got it covered. Here's another helpful tip from Helium 10.
So something people can do right now, if you're not already, is if you're paying for ad spend on Amazon, and at this point, almost everybody is, right? You have a couple ways to do it. You can have Amazon take the money for that ad spend out of what they otherwise would have paid you in your deposit, or you can choose to pay for it directly using a credit card. And that is the route I would recommend. If you don't have a credit card already, get yourself one that's got a good cash back rewards or miles or whatever, makes sense for you, and shift your ad spend over onto that platform, right? You're still spending the same amount on ads. They're paying you out, and then you just turn around and pay the credit card. But we've literally got clients who are making $50,000, $75,000 a year just in cashback rewards by running their ad spend through their credit card, rather than letting Amazon hang on to it and reducing that payout. So that's an easy bonus you can you can do immediately as an Amazon seller that benefits you. You get those rewards for money you were going to spend anyways, rather than letting Amazon hold on to it and reduce your payout. So just a quick, easy tip, a way to put some money or miles, rewards points back in your pocket for selling on Amazon.
Our third and final story comes to us from a 7-figure seller based out of New York, New York, the Big Apple. And what their mistake was basing their margins off of their competitors and assuming that their products were actually the same size, when in actuality, the seller's product was just like an inch longer, but caused them to have a dramatic hike in FBA fees compared to their competitors. So how did this situation come about? Like, how does that happen? Well, when sellers do product research for private label ideas, oftentimes they will find a niche or a competitor's products that they really like, and they think like, hey, I think this is a great product, but maybe I just need to do a little bit better marketing for it. Or maybe I can do a better listing than this competitor can, and I can outsell them. Some sort of edge that they can gain on their competitor is usually where you find it, but at the core of it comes a pretty decent or high quality product that you know you can make better or that you can market better. That's what it ultimately comes down to, right? And so what will then usually happen is then you go find a supplier based on that. You'll find a supplier that mostly resembles what you want based on price point, product design, product function, whatever, right? But one of those big things that this seller didn't think about was dimensions. And so that's where they found a supplier, they found somebody who can make what they were looking for that was pretty close to what the competitors were offering, but was in the same niche. Launched the product, we did the whole thing A to Z, forgot it from the supplier, launched the product, sold it on Amazon, got sales, but then that's when they realized, oh man, they forgot about the dimensions. They just kind of assumed that, hey, this supplier, they're making the same kind of products that they're selling to my competitors, then it's the same size, right? It's like thinking like, oh, I see this notebook on Amazon and I want to sell a notebook just like this, but I want to sell it in red. And I find somebody who sells this notebook and I ask them, can you do it in red? And they're like, yeah, I can do that in red. And you're like, great, send me a sample unit. I love it. I'll buy 1,000 units. I'll sell it on Amazon. Bada bing, bada boom. But what's missing from that conversation, and what was the biggest lesson that this seller learned, is to be wary of how much product dimensions can impact your FBA fees, and to ensure that your product dimensions match that of your competitors. Because usually when you're doing private label research or product research, you're basing your profitability, your margins, your fees, all the financial metrics based off what your competitors are. But keep in mind, your competitors have a specific size of their product. They have specific dimensions. So if you don't utilize the same dimensions as your competitors do, or the majority of your competitors do, then your expected fees and cost are not going to be the same. So that's why typically people will mimic the product dimensions of their competitors. So ultimately, that's why you should be mindful of how product dimensions can impact your FBA fees. And what you can do to get past that is double check the dimensions of your competitors' products using the profitability calculator in Helium 10's Chrome extension, and double check, triple check, quadruple check that you communicate with your supplier to match those dimensions so that your FBA fees will mimic those of your competitors, and all you got to worry about is just selling better. Well, that's it for our stories this week. We really appreciate you guys tuning in for our first initial launch of Learning from L's with Lem, Helium 10. We're so happy to have you. If you do like some of these stories, or if you got stories of your own, feel free to let us know. You can send your stories to sellerstories@helium10.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. I'm Lem Turner, and I'll see you next time.